What would you do if a complete stranger started yelling at you in public? Would you yell back? Walk away? Now, imagine this isn't just any ordinary situation. You're Jeff Bezos. Yes, Jeff Bezos. Billionaire, entrepreneur, one of the most recognized names on the planet. What happens when someone calls him out, not behind the safety of a screen, but in the middle of a bustling coffee shop? How does someone with the world watching respond to such an unexpected and emotional confrontation? The answer might just change the way you see him forever. Today, we dive into a story that's about more than just wealth or fame. It's about humanity. It starts in an ordinary coffee shop on an otherwise ordinary day. A place filled with the soft hum of conversations, the clink of ceramic mugs, and the unmistakable aroma of freshly brewed coffee. But in the corner sits a man whose face you've seen 1,000 times on the news, in magazines, and maybe even in the business books on your shelf, Jeff Bezos. For him, it might just be another morning, another cup of coffee. For everyone else, it's the rare sight of the man behind the empire. But then, everything changes. Enter a stranger, a man whose life couldn't be more different from Jeff's. A man burdened by frustration, pain, and loss. And in that coffee shop, these two worlds collide. Words are exchanged, emotions run high, and what follows is not just a confrontation but a moment that reveals a deeper truth about leadership, humility, and the unexpected ways people can connect. As we unravel this story, ask yourself, what does it mean to truly listen, even when faced with anger? Can an act of empathy change the course of someone's day, or even their life? And most importantly, how would you react if you were in Jeff Bezos' shoes? Stay with us because by the end of this, you may just see the world, and perhaps yourself, a little differently. It's a rainy morning, the kind where the sky feels heavy, and the world moves just a little slower. Inside a cozy corner coffee shop, the air is warm and alive with the quiet hum of everyday life. The hiss of steaming milk blends with the low murmur of conversation, punctuated now and then by the cheerful ding of the register. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee is rich, almost intoxicating, wrapping around everyone who steps inside. It's a sanctuary from the chill outside, a place where strangers share space without sharing words. In the far corner of the shop, a man sits alone at a small wooden table. To anyone who doesn't look closely, he's just another customer. Dressed in a simple gray sweater and jeans, his casual appearance belies his identity. But this isn't just anyone, this is Jeff Bezos. Billionaire. Visionary. A man whose ideas have shaped the way the world works. He's hunched slightly over his laptop, his fingers moving methodically across the keys. Beside him, a cappuccino sits half-finished, the foam on top starting to dissolve. Despite his immense influence, in this moment, he seems just like anyone else. A man taking a quiet break from the chaos of the world. The sound of the door opening breaks the rhythm of the shop. A gust of cold air sneaks in, followed by a man in his early 40s. His rugged jacket drips rain onto the tiled floor as he pauses just inside, shaking water from his hair. His face is lined, not just from age but from something deeper, fatigue, perhaps, or frustration. His eyes scan the room, sharp and searching, before landing on the man in the corner. There's a moment of hesitation, just a flicker, as if he's deciding whether to stay or leave. The stranger's gaze lingers on Jeff a second longer than it should. Something unspoken hangs in the air. He turns and moves toward the counter, but there's a tension in his stride, a stiffness in his shoulders, as though he's carrying a burden too heavy to set down. He orders a coffee, his voice low and clipped, before stepping to the side to wait. But his attention keeps drifting back to the man in the corner. His lips move, a muttered word or two that doesn't carry far enough to be heard. If anyone else notices, they don't show it. The shop continues its quiet rhythm, but an undercurrent of unease has entered the space. Jeff, for his part, doesn't seem to notice. Or maybe he does but chooses not to react. He remains focused on his screen, his face calm, his movements deliberate. The stranger picks up his coffee and moves to a table, but he doesn't sit. Instead, he stands there for a moment, gripping the cup tightly as though trying to steady himself. His eyes return to Jeff, and this time, there's no hesitation. Whatever storm he's brought in from the rain is about to break. The stranger lingers by the counter, his fingers drumming lightly on the surface as he waits for his coffee. His eyes flick to Jeff every few seconds, then away, as though he's wrestling with unspoken thoughts. Around the shop, a few customers are beginning to notice. Quiet whispers ripple through the space, subtle but unmistakable. Words like Bezos and Amazon hang in the air, carried by curiosity and the kind of excitement that arises when someone famous is unexpectedly nearby. The man's coffee is ready, but he doesn't sit. Instead, he takes a deliberate sip, his gaze hardening every time it lands on Jeff. His muttering starts quietly, almost to himself, but it grows louder with each passing moment. Figures. Sitting here like he owns the world. Probably does, he says under his breath, though loud enough for the barista to glance nervously in Jeff's direction. The chatter in the shop dims, and more heads turn subtly toward the corner table. A few customers pull out their phones, sensing that something unusual is brewing. Jeff's phone buzzes, breaking the growing tension. Without looking up, he answers it, his voice calm and measured. "Yes, I'll review it later today," he says, his tone revealing nothing of the unease building in the room. But for the stranger, this is the breaking point. He slams his coffee cup down on the counter with such force that the room falls silent. The sound cuts through the chatter, through the clinking of cups and the whir of the espresso machine. Every eye is now on him. The man turns fully toward Jeff, his voice rising like a wave crashing against the quiet. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he demands, his tone laced with anger and something deeper, pain. "People like you destroy lives." His words hang heavy in the air, a thunderclap in the stillness of the shop. For a moment, no one moves. The barista freezes mid-pour. Customers exchange uneasy glances, and a few instinctively lower their phones, unsure if it's still appropriate to record. Jeff slowly looks up from his phone, his expression unreadable. There's no surprise, no defensiveness, just a steady calm that seems almost unnatural under the circumstances. He places his phone down on the table, deliberate in his movements, and leans back slightly in his chair, giving the man his full attention. But he says nothing. Not yet. The weight of his silence fills the room, amplifying the tension. It's as if the air itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what will happen next. In the silence that follows, the stranger's breathing is audible, shallow, rapid, fueled by adrenaline. The customers closest to Jeff seem torn between intervening and staying out of it, their uncertainty mirrored in their shifting postures. The barista, clearly unsure whether to step in, glances toward the manager, who hesitates as well. The room feels like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. But Jeff remains calm, unmoving, his gaze locked on the stranger as if inviting him to continue. Finally, the man breaks the silence again, his voice cracking slightly as he points an accusing finger. "You don't care, do you? All you see are profits and numbers, not the people you crush along the way." His words are sharp, but underneath them lies a tremor of vulnerability, a man who's been holding on to this moment for far too long. And still, Jeff says nothing. His silence is no longer passive, it's deliberate, calculated, like the stillness before a storm. Without warning, the stranger's voice cuts through the tense silence again, louder this time, tinged with bitterness and years of pent-up frustration. "You don't care about the little guy, do you? You think you're untouchable, sitting up there in your ivory tower with all your billions?" He spits, the words sharp like daggers. "You're just a greedy billionaire who got lucky. You've built an empire on the backs of people like me, people who worked hard, who had dreams. And you? You crushed them. You took everything from us." His voice trembles with rage, but there's something else underneath it, a sense of powerlessness, as if he's been fighting an invisible battle for years, and today, in this coffee shop, he's finally going to make someone listen. The shop, which had been murmuring quietly before, now falls into a complete and unnatural silence. A hushed tension fills the room. Some of the customers, who had previously been absorbed in their own world, now turn their attention fully to the confrontation unfolding in front of them. Their phones slowly rise from the tables and pockets, discreetly at first, then more openly, capturing every word, every gesture. They watch not just because it's Jeff Bezos, but because they sense the raw, unfiltered emotion of the moment. Everyone in the room feels the weight of it. This isn't just an argument. It's something deeper, something personal. The barista, her hands shaking as she steadies herself against the counter, looks at the manager with uncertainty in her eyes. Should she intervene? Should she call for security? The room holds its collective breath as Jeff and the strangers stand locked in a silent standoff, the heat of the moment intensifying with every word the man spits out. There's a palpable fear in the air, not of physical violence, but of what might be revealed next. The words are already cutting deep, but the stranger isn't finished yet. And then, as if the weight of all the years of anger and pain suddenly becomes too much, the man's voice cracks. It's a sound so raw, so heartbreaking, it sends a shiver through the room. "My father built that store from nothing," he says, his voice breaking with emotion, the rage now replaced by sorrow. "He worked every day, day and night. He put everything into that place. It was our family's legacy. And then Amazon came to town, and we couldn't compete. Slowly we had to close up. It wasn't just a store, it was a part of who we were." For a brief moment, the man stands there, as if the words he's just spoken have drained him. His shoulders slump, and the fight seems to leave him, replaced by a grief that can't be hidden. He wipes his eyes, only to reveal that they've already filled with tears. "When that store closed, my father, he gave up. He didn't know how to go on. And you were the reason he's gone. You took it all away. You're the reason he couldn't fight anymore." His breath hitches, and for the first time, the anger seems to dissipate, replaced by a heartbreaking vulnerability. His chest heaves with the weight of his confession, and the tears that have been building finally escape, slipping down his face. The coffee shop is still, deathly still. The only sound is the man's labored breathing, the occasional sniffle as he tries to regain composure. No one moves. The patrons are caught in the emotional gravity of the moment. Some stare at the man with a mixture of sympathy and awe, while others glance at Jeff, searching his face for any sign of how he's processing what's just been said. The barista, her hand trembling as she wipes down the counter, looks like she wants to say something, but words seem too small for the enormity of the situation. In that moment, time seems to stretch, as if the room itself is waiting for Jeff's response. There's a heavy stillness in the air. The kind of silence that presses down on you, making every breath feel louder, every heartbeat more pronounced. It's as if the world outside the coffee shop has paused entirely. The man stands before Jeff, his shoulders trembling slightly, eyes filled with tears that seem to speak of years of pain, regret, and unresolved anger. Then Jeff doesn't rush to speak. He doesn't jump in to defend himself, to justify his actions, or to retort with the sharpness that his wealth and fame might give him the privilege to do. No, he simply stands, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze locked on the man in front of him. The room, tense and taut with expectation, holds its breath as Jeff rises from his chair. There's no sign of arrogance in his posture. No hint of the billionaire titan who could easily dismiss this moment. Instead, he steps forward, his gaze softened by empathy, as if he understands the weight of what's been shared. Slowly, he reaches out, but not in a way that feels like an attempt to pacify or placate. It's as if he genuinely wants to connect. "I'm truly sorry for your loss," Jeff says, his voice calm, steady, and surprisingly sincere. The words hang in the air for a long moment, thick with a sincerity that seems to surprise the man standing before him. "I'd like to hear more about your father and his store," Jeff continues, the invitation in his tone genuine and unhurried. "Can we sit and talk?" His voice is not the booming, authoritative tone of a CEO, but the voice of a human being who understands, perhaps, that this moment is about something much bigger than business, than profits, than success. This moment is about connecting with another person, sharing their pain, and offering something more meaningful than a response. It's about recognizing that there is a shared humanity, regardless of the power or position that separates them. The man, his chest still rising and falling with the weight of his emotions, blinks at Jeff, as if unsure whether this is a trick, or if perhaps he's hearing things. The room watches with bated breath, waiting to see if Jeff's offer is genuine or just an attempt to defuse the situation. But Jeff doesn't let the silence grow uncomfortable. Instead, he opens up in a way that no one expects. He doesn't stand above the stranger, doesn't try to explain his actions or offer up a defense. Instead, he shares something personal. Something raw. "You know," Jeff begins, his voice lowering just slightly, "I started out selling books too." His gaze seems to soften, as if he's taking the stranger on a journey back in time, to a place where the world didn't know his name, where he wasn't a billionaire, but just another person trying to make something of himself. "I know what it's like to risk everything for a dream. To put every ounce of your energy, your heart, your soul into something, only to have it be rejected or overlooked. To feel like you're fighting an impossible fight." There's a quiet pause as Jeff exhales slowly, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The audience in the room, whether they realize it or not, is now seeing Jeff not as a titan of industry, but as a man who's been through his own struggles, who knows what it's like to fail, to make mistakes. "But I also made mistakes along the way," Jeff continues, his voice more reflective now, as if he's not just talking to the stranger, but to himself. "I didn't always have the answers. I didn't always know the right way. And I certainly didn't know the impact Amazon would have, not just on the world, but on the small businesses like your father's." His words are heavy with the weight of understanding, but also with regret. He's not apologizing for Amazon's success or his own, but for the unintended consequences, the collateral damage that came with it. And then, as if to make it clear that this is more than just an exchange of words, Jeff leans forward slightly, his tone serious but still warm. "I'm working on programs to support small businesses," he says. "I know that we can't undo the past, but I want to find a way to make things right. To help businesses like your father's thrive in a world that's constantly changing. Maybe we can find a way to honor your father's legacy. Maybe his story can inspire others who are fighting that same fight." His words linger in the air, not as empty promises, but as a genuine offer. There's no grand gesture, no sweeping announcement of a billion-dollar donation or a headline-making partnership. Instead, Jeff offers something more personal, more impactful. A chance to be part of something that goes beyond business. A chance to make a difference in the lives of others. The air in the coffee shop, once thick with tension, begins to shift. The man, his posture still rigid, still steeped in the anger and grief that has consumed him, slowly exhales. His breath is heavy, but it's different now. The sharpness of his frustration starts to dull, replaced by a vulnerability that was hidden beneath his defiance. As Jeff's words linger in the room, they settle over him like a cool wave, washing away some of the burning bitterness he's carried for so long. He blinks, his eyes glossing over with the hint of something deeper. Something softer. Without a word, he slowly lowers himself into the seat across from Jeff, his movements less aggressive now, more resigned. The anger that once consumed him is slowly melting away, replaced by something far more profound: sorrow. It's not just the sorrow of his father's loss, but the sorrow of years spent holding on to resentment, building walls that now feel unnecessary, now feel like they've been holding him back. He looks up at Jeff, his voice trembling as he speaks, almost as if he's fighting to keep himself together, to retain his pride. Jeff Bezos, for all his success and power, didn't stand in judgment. Instead, he stood as a reminder that even the most powerful figures can show humility and empathy. His willingness to listen, to extend a hand of understanding, wasn't about a business deal or a PR move, it was about real human connection. In that moment, it wasn't about his wealth or status. It was about seeing another person's pain and responding with genuine care. The man too had a choice. He could have walked away from that conversation, still clinging to his anger, still seeing Jeff as a symbol of everything that went wrong in his life. But instead, he chose something different. He chose to hear Jeff's words. He chose to soften, to let go of the weight that had held him captive for so long. In doing so, he not only changed his own perspective, but also gave us all a glimpse into the power of empathy and forgiveness. So, what would you have done if you were Jeff? Would you have stood your ground, or would you have responded differently? Maybe you've had your own moment where a conversation turned into a revelation. We want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. What do you think this story teaches us about the power of listening, of understanding, of showing kindness in the face of conflict. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of unexpected encounters, where we dive into real-life lessons and the surprising moments that shape our perspectives. These stories are a reminder that the world around us is full of opportunities to change the course of someone's day, or even their life, with just a simple act of kindness. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you more powerful stories next time.